She was just a staff kid no one noticed, until a bored millionaire, smirking, invited her to sit at the grand piano. His words, "Don't break it," landed like an insult meant to put her in her place. But instead, Ariana played something so powerful it froze the entire lobby and forced the world and him to finally see her. But just wait until you hear the shocking twist in this story and how, in the end, justice came full circle. The lobby of the Ritz-Carlton was like a museum of quiet wealth, gold accents, fresh orchids, and conversations that never rose above a murmur. A jazz trio played somewhere in the background, but their notes blended into the polished air like scent into perfume. The kind of place where everything whispered, "You don't belong unless you can afford to not care." Henry Whitmore could afford not to care. 63 years old, built on venture capital and old New York money, Henry didn't walk, he occupied space. In a charcoal Armani suit tailored with silent aggression and cufflinks worth more than most used cars, he stood near the grand piano sipping an overpriced Cabernet he didn't enjoy. That wasn't the point. The point was that the bottle cost $400 and someone was watching. He didn't mind being watched. In fact, he counted on it. Tonight, however, he was bored. Board meetings, wine tastings, forced laughter, it all blended into one long, expensive blur. He wanted something entertaining, unexpected. That's when he saw her. A girl, young, maybe 11, maybe 12, black, thin, hair tied up in a small, careful bun. Clothes clean but clearly stretched past their limits, jeans riding above her ankles, sneakers too white to be fashionable. She wasn't sitting, wasn't running around, just standing by the piano, staring at it like someone stares at a cake they know they'll never taste. His lips curled into something between a smirk and a challenge. "Hey, kid." His voice cut through the lobby like a pebble tossed into still water. She flinched. The concierge tensed. A waiter slowed mid-step. But Henry didn't even turn to them. His eyes stayed locked on the girl. "You know how to play that thing?" Her name was Ariana Brooks. She came here often, not to stay, but to wait. Her mother worked coat check most nights, part-time, part cash, trying to keep rent paid and bills from piling too high. Ariana would sit in the service hallway with her books until her mom finished the shift. But sometimes, like tonight, she wandered toward the piano. It wasn't allowed, but no one really noticed her. Until now. She didn't answer, just stared back at him like this might be a test or a trick. Henry tilted his head, waiting. Behind her, a man in a linen suit chuckled. "This ought to be good," someone else muttered. Ariana's heart pounded. She looked toward the coat check. Her mom wasn't there. She looked at the piano, the polished, monstrous instrument that seemed to breathe on its own. Then back at the man. He looked powerful, the kind of man who didn't hear no. Was he mocking her or giving her a moment? It didn't matter. She knew what would happen if she refused. The crowd would laugh, forget her in 5 seconds, and she'd walk away knowing she'd missed her only chance. So she moved. Slowly, like she was stepping onto a frozen lake she wasn't sure would hold her weight. The velvet bench swallowed her when she sat. Her fingers hovered above the keys, just high enough to tremble. "Don't break it," Henry said, already turning away. The jazz trio had stopped playing. No one noticed. But they were all watching her now. Ariana's hands hovered above the keys like wings, not yet ready to take flight. Her fingers shook, not from fear, not entirely, but from the weight of the moment. She had never touched a piano like this. At home, her world was filled with the hum of old pipes and the muffled rhythm of spinning dryers beneath their apartment. Her keyboard, second-hand, half-broken, had 3 dead notes and keys that stuck on rainy days. But she didn't mind. It was hers. Music was never about perfection for her. It was about survival. Her grandmother once played gospel in a small Mississippi church with no air conditioning and no microphones, just voices, clapping, and soul. Her father, before life pulled him away, would sit her on his lap and play Coltrane until the neighbors banged on the walls. She learned by listening, feeling, remembering. She took a breath, closed her eyes, and touched the first key. It was soft, tentative, almost like asking a question. The second note answered, steady, a little braver. By the third, something began to bloom. The lobby didn't go silent all at once. It was gradual, the kind of silence that spreads like a tide. The waiter paused mid-pour. The couple at the bar leaned in, forgetting their champagne. A mother hushed her child before realizing she was the one making noise. The melody Ariana played wasn't from any book. It wasn't Mozart or Chopin. It wasn't even fully planned. It was hers. Each note rose like a memory, aching but warm. A lullaby stitched with sorrow and something else underneath, hope. It sounded like late nights with no heat, like love that left but never really vanished, like someone who still believes in morning even after the darkest kind of night. Her fingers moved with a quiet confidence, as if the keys were guiding her instead of the other way around. Her eyes remained shut, not out of fear, but devotion. She was inside the music now. The world had faded. Somewhere near the bar, a fork slipped from someone's hand and hit the floor. No one picked it up. The hotel manager emerged from his office, brow furrowed. Then he stopped. His expression softened. And at the center of it all, a little girl in worn sneakers and hand-me-down jeans was holding the attention of CEOs, influencers, tourists, and strangers with nothing but raw, unpolished brilliance. Even Henry, who had stopped listening to music decades ago, found himself listening, really listening. He slowly lowered his glass. For the first time that night, maybe for the first time in years, he felt something unfamiliar, something unsettling, something like humility. Something had cracked inside him. He didn't know what it was, but it had her name written all over it. The final note hung in the air like a prayer that didn't need words. Ariana's hands slowly came to rest on her lap. Her eyes opened, not fast, not dramatic, just calm, still half in the world she'd created. For a long moment, nothing happened. Not a whisper, not a breath. Just the rhythmic ticking of the lobby's antique clock cutting through the silence like distant footsteps in a cathedral. Then, applause. Not polite, not forced, not out of obligation. It started small, one pair of hands, then another, but within seconds it became a wave, loud, spontaneous, raw. The kind of applause that wasn't just appreciation, it was recognition. Recognition of something rare, of something real. Guests who had smirked when she sat down now stood to their feet, clapping with wide eyes and parted lips. A woman near the fireplace had tears on her cheeks. A man in a suit mouthed "incredible" to no one in particular. It didn't feel like a performance. It felt like a moment they'd be telling their children about someday. I was there. I saw her before the world knew her name. And Henry Whitmore, he didn't move, didn't blink. His glass sat untouched on the marble table. For the first time in years, his thoughts were silent. No deals, no calculations, just one question echoing in his head. Who is this girl? He finally stood, slowly, as if pulled upward by something he couldn't explain, and walked toward her. She looked up, uncertain, her hands still resting on the keys. She didn't smile, she didn't shrink, she simply was. "What?" he began, voice lower than usual. "What was that?" Ariana blinked, thought, then said, barely above a whisper, "I don't know. I just played what I feel." It wasn't the answer he expected, but it was the only one that made sense. Henry swallowed, caught off guard by something tightening in his chest, a feeling he hadn't invited, a softness he didn't recognize. He turned to the manager, who was still frozen near the edge of the room. Get her a proper piano, and lessons, and anything else she needs. If you don't, he paused. I will. The manager nodded, already pulling out his phone, his face pale but alert, like someone just awakened from a dream. Henry looked back at Ariana. He opened his mouth, but the words came slowly. He shook his head. You're something else. And for once, that was all he needed to say, because in that moment, nothing more was required. 3 years passed, not in a blur, but in thousands of quiet, determined hours. Early mornings, long nights, practice, failure, more practice. And now, Lincoln Center. The hall stood tall and luminous, its walls having echoed the greatest music ever written. But tonight, it would echo something new. On stage, under a single spotlight, sat a girl, 14, composed, still. Not a prodigy, not a miracle, a worker of beauty, a builder of emotion, a storyteller with keys instead of words. Ariana Brooks, the youngest pianist to debut an original composition at one of the world's most prestigious stages. She wore a simple navy dress, nothing extravagant. But when she placed her fingers on the grand piano, she lit the room without needing light. In the front row, her mother sat motionless, hands clasped, tears sliding silently down her cheeks. Not out of sadness, not even pride, but from something deeper, something like vindication. And near the back, row L, seat 18, sat Henry Whitmore. No tuxedo, no spotlight, just a quiet presence, watching, listening, remembering. He had insisted on the back row. No attention, no credit. Because for once in his life, he didn't care about being seen. He cared about seeing. The music poured out of Ariana like sunlight through stained glass. Colorful, radiant, sharp in places, but healing in others. It wasn't designed to impress. It was meant to connect. And it did. When the final note faded into stillness, the audience rose like a wave, not out of routine, but need. They needed to stand. They needed to honor. Ariana stood. She bowed once, with grace, but not with grandeur. Then, as the applause thundered on, she turned her head, just slightly, scanning the crowd. And for a brief, flickering second, her eyes found Henry's. He didn't smile. He didn't wave. But she did. A small smile, private, real, one that said, I remember. And maybe, thank you. He nodded. That night, the headlines wrote themselves. From lobby to legend, 14-year-old stuns the world with her original symphony. They showed her photo, listed her accolades, quoted critics. But those who were there that first day, they knew something more. The world hadn't handed Ariana Brooks a stage. It hadn't offered her a future. It hadn't even seen her until it had no choice. Because she didn't ask, she didn't wait, she took her moment and played it so beautifully, the world had no choice but to listen and to remember.